hello, everybody, and welcome to our new ZoomCast series, Fresh Start the FoodTech Experts, where we'll be hosting global FoodTech leaders and food industry experts for an up-close and personal chat to share their views on the FoodTech ecosystem, their entrepreneurial experience, and their personal take on the wonders and challenges of FoodTech, from technology to investments and everything in between. So our first guest, Lou Cooperhouse, President and CEO of BlueNalu, no doubt one of the leading seafood companies, cell culture seafood companies today. Thank you for coming, Lou, and welcome.
Thank you for having me. It's a real pleasure to be on your show, and real excited for the brand new program you're creating for the state of Israel.
Thank you. So just before we start, for those of you who are unfamiliar with us, Fresh Start is an Israeli food tech incubator. We're part of the Israeli Innovation Authority incubator program. We're set in the midst of the evolving food tech valley in the beautiful north of Israel, and supported by 4 amazing partners. We have 2 industrial partners, Nuva, who's Israel's leading food company, and Tempo, which is a leading beverage company. They're both supported by global partners. And we have 2 leading global VCs as our financial partners, Our Crowd and Philistere Ventures. So without further ado, Lou, let's start with you. Just to say a word, you're a food industry veteran with a remarkable 35 years career in food innovation, technology commercialization, business incubation. You led cross-functional teams in a wide area of settings, from new business startups to huge corporates, food service to retail, variety of innovation platforms that you've been leading. So can you tell us a little bit about this journey?
Thanks for the question. Yeah, actually, I think with everything in life, one's experiences really help them prepare for the next pathway in their journey. And that's clearly been the case with me. So my background has been, as you mentioned, a very diversified set of companies, always in the food industry, always focused on culinary-centric, great tasting products, but in many cases made differently. So whether it was perishable prepared foods, new technologies, gluten-free or diabetic meals, or any other sort of innovation, I've really been enjoyed being at the forefront of an awful lot of, kind of game-changing opportunities over the decades. But I've also really enjoyed working in different environments, and I really welcome any entrepreneur to really think about that very thoughtfully. I've worked in family-run companies, university innovation centers, trade associations, and certainly multinational companies and startup businesses. So in all those experiences, one can really utilize and leverage the knowledge to really foster new opportunities. And I just really want to particularly encourage any entrepreneur to really value those relationships. At the end of the day, those relationships from, in my case, decades ago, continue to be there and to be, opportunity, and can be leveraged for other opportunities in the future.
Nice. So BlueNalu, can you kind of share what's this name all about?
Sure. Yeah, the BlueNalu, the word nalu is actually a Hawaiian word for wave. So one might have heard of the word Moana. So it's the nalu of the Moana, it's the wave of the ocean. But nalu is also a word in Hawaiian slang. It really, if you tell somebody nalu it really means, hey, be mindful, be thoughtful, go with the flow. And I found it to be a really interesting word as we thought about naming this company. And actually the origins of the company actually go back to Hawaii. I was literally doing some consulting work in food innovation and really setting up entrepreneurship ecosystems, initially at Rutgers University in New Jersey, USA. But I found myself helping set up other ecosystems like that, throughout the world, in fact. And I had the great opportunity to be in Israel as well and to really talk to companies and organizations about the same model that we had in New Jersey. But I literally was working for the University of Hawaii and really supporting that kind of entrepreneurship there. And I was talking about some case studies, some amazing technologies, really trying to motivate other people to get involved with entrepreneurship. And to be honest, I found myself motivating myself,
That's always nice. Yeah.
And I was talking about, something I saw as potentially the most disruptive, transformative technology ever developed in the food industry to manufacture an animal product without the animal, just from its cells, and I really saw that as game changing. And the whole category, as I'm sure we'll talk about, initially began on mammalian-based products like hamburgers made from cows in this situation. But I said to myself, fabulous technology, but there's, in my opinion, a far more compelling opportunity in its seafood. And I'm happy to talk to you more about why seafood. But there was, BlueNalu was really about focusing on the ocean and ocean biodiversity, maintaining that healthy ecosystem, recognizing that so much of our life on this planet comes from the ocean. And BlueNalu is really all about, preserving that biodiversity and maintaining healthy oceans for future generations by changing our the way in which we consume products and thinking differently. So again, you can see how the thoughtfulness, really can translate into various elements of how we communicate the company's values.
Absolutely. But you've touched upon this issue that actually, when we talk about cell culture, most of the companies are more focused on terrestrial cell culture. And I guess this kind of poses a huge technological challenge of kind of getting into a new area. So maybe we can just hop right into that. What are the main challenges you would have put out there when it comes to moving to seafood cell culture?
Yeah, well, it's exactly right. So where I was kind of fascinated with the technology, as I mentioned, but I was even more fascinated if you intersected that technology with the market that I thought made the most sense. And that's really key for any entrepreneur, to really not be overly excited by a technology or operations, but really looking at the market. Where can I apply this technology, this skill? Where could it make the greatest difference? And when I thought about seafood, answer your question kind of two ways. First, I said, what are the benefits? And then what are the challenges? So the benefits are, seafood is a global challenge. Let's just put it very, very directly. We have an increasing global demand. In fact, it's an all-time high. So throughout my career, I've seen the medical community suggesting that people migrate from eating red meats towards the health benefits of fish. Please change your diet. And that's happening. So we're seeing globally, the largest per capita consumption of seafood that we've ever seen. What's the problem? We all know it. It's our supply. We cannot keep up. So we have a global supply chain gap that is only getting worse. So wild fisheries have been flat for several decades. There is no more fish coming from the ocean. It is overfished. And if you look at all the data, it is absolutely flat for over 2 decades. So aquaculture,
the destruction that's going on during the
exactly
process.
Right.
Yeah.
And aquaculture is trying to keep up with that supply, and it can't. So first we have a global supply chain gap, and as you mentioned, then we look at how that fish is actually, caught, and we have trawling at the bottom of the oceans. We have nets, loss of, the coral degradation, loss of sea life. The whole issue with animal suffering is quite significant. 1 to 3 trillion fish are believed to be harvested each year for our consumption. From in terms of lives lost, it's the greatest by far, and those lives that are lost suffer quite greatly. So that's its own little story about, land terrestrial animals have a relatively quick death, but sea animals have a very sad death, if one actually thinks about it more specifically. But then there's issues with human health, microplastics in the ocean, environmental pollutants, toxins, mercury. So what's really unique about sea animals versus land animals, there's both have issues with animal suffering, antibiotic usage, and other characteristics, and sustainability metrics clearly resonate. But there's a human health issue on the consumer side that is unparalleled. So when I thought about seafood, I said that, the opportunity is quite significant because we could actually make a healthier product without the mercury. Think about potentially a mercury-free claim possibly someday, without environmental, all the benefits there. And then from a restaurant perspective, we have consistency. There's a reason why you go to a restaurant and it might say market price. Ask your server. What that really means is, I don't know. It means my supply is variable. I'm not sure if it's what price it will come in at. So what BlueNalu can offer is now a demand-driven model, not a supply-restricted model. You can predict land animals. You cannot predict sea animals. Yeah. So it's a total paradigm shift from a supply chain point of view and all the other benefits I mentioned. So therein lie the challenges. Never been done before. Nobody had ever propagated fish shells. The regulatory climate throughout the world did not exist when we started. There was no methodology for these products to ever be safely introduced
Or
into
for
the
cell
public.
culture in a general aspect, yeah.
Yeah, so on the terrestrial animals, the category had started, and there was some knowledge based on humans, hamsters, and mice, and everything in between. But with fish, there was very little data known on how to actually propagate fish cells at all and grow them in large cell culture, and ideally to do that without any animal-based ingredients, without genetic engineering. So whereas the opportunity was quite challenging, no technology, no engineering, no factory has ever been made, no regulatory agency has ever approved this, no consumer has ever enjoyed it. So therein, and there's no IP, no technology that existed. All those to me were opportunities about how we could get first mover advantage and really leverage, I put together a team that could really accomplish this in a very holistic fashion. So whereas there were challenges, and there are many, and lastly, one of the big challenges, frankly, was this industry was called lab grown. And it was something I had great problems with. This is food. This is culinary. Yeah, this category, was initially shown in a petri dish with a hamburger patty. What a horrible image. This is great tasting, delicious seafood. And part of my challenge too was to migrate this whole terminology towards deliciousness. And that's what we feel we've really been able to do over the last several years. And by the time we introduce this, very confident that this will be really readily received and welcomed, and we can really make a demonstrable difference.
So if you've touched upon the regulation of this field, so in terms of how to approach something that's never been touched before, other than the labeling, which is crucial in terms of the consumer, of course, but the whole process has to be regulated, and nobody knows anything, actually. So how did you address this? And I know you've been addressing this from the very beginning, so you had kind of an agenda there to start with. Can you kind of share that?
If fortunately, I've had, I mentioned leveraging your experiences earlier. So interestingly, maybe 20 years ago, I actually was involved with diabetic products. And I similarly, had the idea to actually create some labeling that would be appropriate for diabetics. So when they consume this product, it would recognize that this is designed for them. So that knowledge is actually quite helpful as I kind of went back in my memory banks there. And when we started BlueNalu, we're very fortunate in the United States, there was public meetings. This is a common process where the government would encourage all stakeholders to come and testify. So I went down to Washington, D.C. and I testified, and I was joined by cattlemen, NGOs, non-government organizations, academics, all sorts of, walks of life were presenting for a short period of time. And my comment was, a commitment to food safety, a commitment to transparency. And that's what I said in my comments. And then I had that opportunity to actually introduce myself to various individuals from FDA and USDA. They were still kind of defining their methodology. And the comment was said, we encourage, companies that are startups to come early and often. Mm-hmm. And many companies are fearful of the regulatory authorities. I find them, and have historically found them to be very embracing. They want to work with industry. One should not be fearful. One should, and when I approached them, I said, listen, we are very early in our process and our technology development. We have a strategy. We would love to meet with you and share that with you. And sure enough, they said, thank you. We really aren't quite clear ourselves on how this should be regulated. We don't know what variability might exist from one company to the next. So sure enough, it has been a very iterative process where we have met with, in our case, the FDA, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, for some time now, for approaching 2 years now. Early on, it was just getting to know each other and explaining the process, understanding what their concerns might be. And I must say it was an extremely beneficial relationship and process, because we understand what is important to them.
Looking for, yeah.
Exactly. And therefore, if there's some particular assays that they're looking for, we could really integrate that in our technology development. And we have made up so much time. So yes, this is taking a fair amount of time to get going.
Yeah.
But I'm fearful, frankly, for other companies that follow in our footsteps that think that they have it all figured out, and then they go to the FDA, and then they might hear, well, you can't do that. I need more information here, and they need to really do certain elements all over again. And that's the beauty of really working, in that relationship. And we are applying that same logic around the world. So we are working with certain national governments in Asia, for example, and having a very similar, what's called a consultative process. It's really when processes aren't yet defined. Sometimes that consultative process exists where you basically
you create it on your own with them.
Yeah, you provide maybe 100 pages of documents and they critique, and then you give them 150 pages more and they critique again, and that's okay. And it's really a very phased approach to getting over the finish line ultimately.
Are there any collaborations between cell culture companies on this matter? Since again, this is kind of a new way of production, if you like, in the food industry. Do you work with other startups on this?
There are. So in the United States, there's a group, the acronym is AMPS, the Alliance for Meat, Poultry, and Seafood Innovation. So BlueNalu was one of the founding members of that. There's now 7 companies in the United States that are all headquartered here, that are all working with the FDA. If it's not clear to some of your listeners, the FDA solely regulates cell culture seafood, and USDA and FDA jointly regulate cell culture meat and poultry. So that is a bit of an anomaly. It's something that they determined a couple of years ago, given the FDA's expertise in this area, that they would manage the food safety and the inspection process to a certain point, and USDA would manage it from that point forward when it comes to meat and poultry. But FDA would be the sole regulator all the way through for cell culture seafood. So each of our 7 companies are interacting with the FDA, and also working collaboratively with industry to really help with what we know is very important to industry, which is nomenclature, is to make sure that our products are differentiated from conventional products with appropriate labeling. The government wants to make sure there's no confusion, and cell culture companies also want our consumers to not be confused. We want them to select our products, frankly. And that's the same kind of model, I understand, is also being developed in Europe. And I'm aware that some Israeli companies are part of that consortium that's being developed in Europe as well. So the same thing with the EU regulatory agencies, that same kind of collaborative network is being put together, and it's very helpful to really make sure everybody's working together, particularly on the regulatory side, which is so important.
That's actually a very positive perspective going forward, I guess, for other companies coming in. Well, aside from regulation, which is a huge challenge here, I think it's pretty much common knowledge that the next big thing to talk about maybe is scale up. And on that matter, I guess BlueNalu is pretty much advanced from most companies operating right now. And you yourself have kind of a unique perspective. They're coming from the food industry rather than biotechnology, which is sometimes the case is when we come to these companies. Can you share maybe a little bit of your perspective there and how this know-how actually supports your way right now? And I know you've already even started to establish a new scale facility, if that's correct.
That's correct. And I must say, the food industry background has been quite helpful because I've worked at Campbell Soup and Conagra and Nestle, very diversified companies early on, and it really gave me some great grounding for how to think about business development, which really helped me throughout my career. But what I mean by that is, it's really important for any entrepreneur is to begin with the end in mind. What does success look like? And I started the company with a total focus on scale up. And I realized when I did some assessment of some of the other founders in the cell culture protein space, that, as you mentioned, a lot of them did come out of biopharma, and there might be a more inherent, process to work in a more linear fashion. In the American alphabet, let me figure out letter B after I figure out letter A. Then I'll worry about letter C. So in our case, I said, what does letter Z look like? What does success look like with many factories? And And this is a $200 billion seafood sector. So with that in mind, I actually kind of work backwards. What would be, if you will, that cookie cutter? What could be a facility that one could scale, modify based on the needs of the market? So I really began with developing what the food industry would call, and other industries I'm sure call it too, stage gate approach. What does each stage of success look like? And so stage 5, as I called it, phase 5, was really a large scale factory that is profitable, that will really demonstrate extraordinary confidence and could perhaps have a very high return on investment. Because we are in fact making 100% yield of product at a factory close by, total paradigm shift. We're working on higher value fish products, in our case, the fillets, not ground informed products, so we can command a premium price point, we believe. And ideally we could do that at a relatively low cost. So phase 5 is a very exciting time, but it takes some time to get there. So what size volume might that be, for example? And then we kind of work, I'll go back to phase 0. So phase 0 is what I call the building blocks, the fundamentals. So what are the tools in my toolbox I need to ever even get there? I need stable cell lines. I need a cryopreservation protocol, so I can create, I can really have those tools to scale. Ideally I'll have that done with multiple species, and I can do that with multiple cell types. So I can make, what am I doing? I'm making a product that has the same sensory attributes as a conventional product. I need muscle, fat, connective tissue. I need, all the texture, mouthfeel, sensory components of conventional seafood products. So my phase 0 is, what are those building blocks that I need? And then in phase 1, I start to make those in bioreactors, in our case. And then there might be even phase 1A, phase 1B, and so forth, because now I'm introducing some engineering milestones. I need to, if you think about fish, back to culinary, not only does it have to look at the sensory and the nutritional and the functional characteristics, how it is prepared. Does it caramelize? Does it take acid like in poke or ceviche? Does it steam, microwave, pan fry, deep fry? But also I need to be thoughtful about texture. When you think about red meat, red meat is a very complex sensory experience, like a ribeye steak. So from a cell cultured steak perspective, a bit more challenging, if you will, than seafood is. So I said to myself, why do I cut steak with not just a knife, but maybe a steak knife? And I cut fish with a fork. It flakes. So what does flaking mean? So these are kind of the philosophy that we think about in phase 0, about how do we really put together a game plan so we could ultimately make a product that might be more homogeneous, because some fish is a bit homogeneous in structure, and some is layered. And those layers, can in fact be accomplished through some of the same engineering technologies used in conventional food processing, like extrusion or layering. There's no shortage of different products in the food industry that are made in that same logic, but never before with obviously cells. So can we apply some normal engineering processes with a unique raw material, live fish cells, that could actually, follow that same logic and be formed in the same way and give consumers the same exact sensory experience. So again, that multi-phase approach was really that design that we really began, in the first few months of the company, really defining what success looks like. And then, right now, to your long answer to your question, but right now we're kind of in that phase 3. We're approaching that phase 3, which is our first time that we will gain regulatory approval, and with a small scale volume, again, not meant to be profitable, but meant to demonstrate a great milestone. So one of those milestones was gaining regulatory approval in a hygienic GMP inspected operation. And that's the phase that we're in right now. We're building out a 40,000 square foot facility. That will be our new headquarters. It will enable us to demonstrate that small scale production in a hygienic facility, to gain regulatory approval as well.
And that's a tipping point on your perspective. This will make you confident that you're on the right track to reach scale. And scale is also price, of course. We haven't touched that at all, but.
Yeah, so I mean, back in late 2019, we did a proof of concept where even in the phase 0, phase 1 timeframe, we demonstrated something that was our first tipping point. We actually created a yellowtail amberjack product, and kind of my earlier comment, we wanted to demonstrate, as weird as this may sound, if you prepare it, does it smell like fish? When you cook it, does it caramelize? Does it does it freeze, thaw? What happens? And, it was quite surreal, I must say. It did all those things. We did it. We made seafood from fish shells and had every characteristic. And it was quite an emotional experience, I must say. And that was about 1.5 years ago. But to your question, when we come out of this new facility, now we're doing proof of commercialization. It's not yet. The third big, tipping point will be proof of profitability. So proof of commercialization in itself is massive tipping point, because it means that we've accomplished something really enormous. FDA regulatory clearance means one thing that has been very concerning to everyone is, can you actually get through this to the FDA in a reasonable period of time? And that's very challenging because we need to use raw materials. There's a supply chain challenge. The supply chain for the raw materials that we're utilizing historically come from pharma, and they are not food grade. So not only we need to come up with a formulation, then we need to really work with a supply chain and identify raw material suppliers that are generally recognized as safe, GRAS, as the acronym is called, and put all those into our process formulation to demonstrate to the FDA and give them the confidence that our products are absolutely safe. And we are already there with that demonstration. We are really in the final phases of getting our documentation together for them. It'll still take another 9 months, possibly 12 months. Just that's how long the process takes. But it's all going very positive. But that'll be a huge tipping point. Because at that point, we'll be able to demonstrate what our cost of goods can be with larger volumes. We'll have all the engineering modeling figured out. And that's just really, within the next 12 to 18 months that we'll have that really significant tipping point.
Very exciting. And actually, wow, time flew. Just figuring out the time. I have maybe 2 quick questions, if you like. First, maybe in terms of a tip to our entrepreneurs on fundraising, because I know you kind of exceeded every round you were approaching on the way. So I know the field is very exciting, but any specific tips on how to approach this, what to do right in order to reach that?
No, thanks for that question. I mean, it's first of all, if you're in the right category with the right process and the right team, I think you have all the recipe there for success.
Which is good. That's what you're saying.
So it's really, putting together a strategy for success, really demonstrating a pathway, and to really think holistically about that long-term approach and what it takes, demonstrating in a very transparent fashion, what it will take to get there, and ideally even how much money one would require to get to that ultimate point. So, the investors use the acronym TAM, total addressable market, and really understand what is your market potential, how will you get there. And in our case, I've been very committed to partnerships. And, I would have to say, when the company got started, I had no partnerships to communicate, but I demonstrated that, that is really the key to our success. And sure enough, 3 years later, we actually have 7 strategic investors, and that come from all parts of the world, because kind of what I laid out on day one is we cannot do this alone. We really need to leverage supply chain partners, and we need operations, sales, market, distribution partners as well. And by laying out that groundwork from day one, then it's like peeling an onion here. The layers happen. And sure enough, everything that we had planned for has fallen into place thus far. We still have a ways to go, but so far, so good.
Right. Would you like to finish up with kind of a statement to the nation, as we say here in Israel, or just a tip for our listeners, kind coming into this field, being an entrepreneur, what will be your major tip for the road?
I guess one tip is, you should be culinary centric. All these ideas are great ones. Technology is a wonderful thing, but it's about great tasting food that meets nutritional characteristics. And, I've learned early on that the number one important criteria for repeat purchase of food is taste. So having all the other benefits is extraordinary, but, focus on sensory and taste, and excite your audience, and another tip is it's really all about the team. None of us can do it by ourselves, and really to recognize your own weaknesses, surround yourself with experts, not just internally, but externally. We consider all of our investors part of our team. All of our partners are part of our team. And we really have both a fixed and a variable, a resource team that really makes us successful. So, and in our case, Tikkun Olam, we're also trying to make the world a better place. And that's really something that, just really encourages all of our team members to be so excited by this space.
Great. Thank you for that. To wrap up, I'm going to hit you with a series of quick questions just to let everybody know you a little bit better. No worries. So let's shoot that and see, just intuitively. So what is your favorite word?
My favorite word is I guess I have a bunch of favorite words, but it really is partnerships. I really do embrace those relationships and partnerships and collaboration. So those are synonyms for a similar word.
Good. What is your least favorite word?
Being myopic, looking too narrow and really not seeing the forest through the trees.
Nice. What makes you wake up in the morning with a smile?
Certainly sunshine is a wonderful thing living here in San Diego. But I'm just I mentioned a little earlier, I'm just very personally motivated to make the world a better place. So it's exciting to be working on technology and products and business, but it's such a double win if you can be doing something and be so proud of the success you hope to accomplish by really doing something better for future generations.
What profession other than yours would you like to attempt?
What profession other than mine would I like to attempt?
Yeah.
So I've always been fascinated by space exploration, but I've always also been fascinated by archaeology. So it's nice. It's a discovery kind of on the past and the future. So maybe it's just a focal interest in discovery in various ways.
And what profession would you not like to attempt at all? Never.
As much as I love the medical community, my parents did want me to be a doctor.
You're doing it in a way,
It wasn't for me. So I feel like I'm accomplishing that. You're right, through having healthier products and keeping people away from the doctor. But I love doctors in the medical community, but it's just not something that I really have the stomach for.
What is your favorite food?
Favorite food? I do love chocolate. And when we mix chocolate in a croissant, that I would have to say that's right up there.
I'm with you. Wonderful. And now the last but not least, if you could choose one person, anyone in the world, dead or alive, to get a cup of coffee with, who would that be?
Wow, good question. Well, one person that's and so many people I admire, but one person that's kind of known in this industry, has a different kind of connection with people, but is Winston Churchill. You might know back in 1931, wrote an article called 50 Years Hence. And he actually, had in that article, which was published, a prediction that basically said, there will become a time, something to the effect of, I'll do my best job to say what he said in his quote. There will be a time when we won't need to, grow chicken, in this conventional way, but we can grow them instead in a medium. So even use those kind of words. without, with just the parts that we eat. So that was 90 years ago. So even though his article is called 50 Years Hence, he was really predicting something. So it'd be really cool to go back in time and say, Winston, it's happening.
We got this. Great. Lou, I can't thank you enough for this. It was a fascinating chat, and I'm really happy to get to know you better. And I'm sure our audience does as well. So thanks a lot for joining us here. And for the rest of you, stay tuned for our next ZoomCast. We'll be hosting the inspiring Tom Saki, the founder and CEO of TerraCycle and of Loop. So thank you so much, and goodbye.
My pleasure. Thank you.